course. Good afternoon to you and welcome to In Focus with Silvana Pavlovska, broadcasting from Melbourne, Australia. Today is the 20th of April and we are continuing our series on the Macedonian question, and in particular Professor Dr. Igor Janev's scholarly publication, The PRESPA Agreement as Cultural Genocide of the Macedonian National Identity. We have reached a point of Chapter 6, and it will be Part 4 that I'll be presenting to you shortly. Chapter 6 is all about conclusions and recommendations by the professor. Professor Igor Janev says, in our research, we have summarized a set of international norms and/or principles related to the PA resulted from the UNSC Resolution 817 and the Resolution 845 that actually needed to be violated or broken in order to make a treaty with national ID modifiers. We quote, 1. The right to self-determination and enshrine self-identification of the peoples and thus of the nations. UN Charter, Article 1 and Article 55. Including the derivative right for states' name choice, including a non-discrimination rule or norm among the UN member states on any grounds. 2. The right to possess and to self-determine states' legal identity as the right to sovereign self-determination of the state, stemming from the self-identification of the people and nations as a subject of international law, UN Charter, Article 1. In addition, we discovered here the crucial jus cogens norm on the legal identity of states as the constituent part of the judicial personality as a main element of their sovereignty and legal independence. 3. The right to sovereign equality, and in particular, its legal equality of the states and the UN membership and outside scope of the UN system of organizations, UN Charter, Article 2, Paragraph 1. This element stemming from the right to judicial equality related to the legal person. 4. The right to political independence and the right of the state not to be dependent on another state or international organization. That's the UN Charter, Article 2, Paragraph 4. This right apparently disgracefully violated in the case of the Macedonian admission. 5, states' right to non-interference by another state or international organization in the matters that are stricto sensu internal jurisdiction of the state, UN Charter, Article 2, Paragraph 7, as the most fundamental pillar norm of international law. 6, the right to non-discrimination in the UN membership among members in accordance with the Vienna Convention on Representation of 1975 and in the United Nations relation vis-a-vis to non-members as an independent international subject. 7, the right to equal sovereign culture and or an inviolability of cultural and national identity, including a freedom of thought, belief, and traditions without foreign interference. Mexico, UNESCO Declaration of 1982. 8. The right to equality in the cultural cooperation, UNESCO Declaration of 1966, without discrimination on any ground and with a duty of everyone to respect the culture of others. 9, the principle of non-retroactive regulation of the past or historical events by dispositive law and prohibition of damnatio memoriae jus cogens, including a limitation to freedom of beliefs and traditions and a duty of others to respect those traditions and beliefs. UN Declaration on Indigenous Peoples' Rights, 2007. 10. Particularly the right to non-discrimination in membership, including process in the United Nations, advisory opinion of the ICJ of 1948, and the resolution of the General Assembly of the UN of 1948, and especially the right to unconditional admission to open universal international organization such as the UN without additional conditions and political considerations being imposed. 11, particularly the right to independent choice of the state's national name as a state's name and the national flag in the United Nations as membership rights, and a right to change of any of these paramount national symbols at any time. Number 12, fundamental right to non-derogation and inviolability of the judicial personality of member states and organizations as an independent international legal subject, Convention on the Privileges and Immunities of the UN of 1946, and the Convention on the Privileges and Immunities of the Specialized Agencies of 1947. 13, the right to legal independence and other equal rights provided in the UN Charter and by other sources in international law, so that the UN can act as a contracting party to the UN Charter equal to other international subjects. 14, the native and inherent right to an independent choice of the people's own self-identification as a primary fundamental right, jus cogens, and the right to collective nationality emerging jus cogens by own self-identification at the level of collective ethnic nationality. In conclusion, the PRESPA agreement violated all basic norms of international law. Therefore, this unbearable situation represents itself as an urgent imperative to resolve the current illegality. We provided in our research a strong case and a set of legal arguments for the Macedonian government, pointing to our unilateral termination of the PRESPA agreement. A ground for unilateral termination we found in the violation of Article 53 of the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties. With respect to jus cogens, a treaty is void if at the time of its conclusion it conflicts with peremptory norms of international law. As discussed earlier, the right to self-determination of nation's name or a state identity represents such a peremptory norm, a jus cogens. As demonstrated, the legal basis of the PRESPA agreement, the Security Council resolutions 817 and 845, are in violation with the UN Charter Articles 1, paragraphs 2 and 7, Article 2, paragraph 1, and Article 4, paragraph 1, and makes the agreement a priori unlawful according to the general legal principle ex injuria jus non oritur. Furthermore, the provisions of the PRESPA agreement explicitly enter into the domain of strict domestic jurisdiction of Macedonia and are in conflict with the basic norms of international law, says Professor Dr. Igor Janev, and brutally establish instruments for permanent illegal intervention into internal and external affairs of the country, Articles 1 and 8 of the PRESPA agreement, derogating its sovereignty and human rights, particularly directly national minority rights in Greece. In addition to Article 53 of the Vienna Convention, Macedonian government can also invoke other grounds for termination of a treaty, such as rule provided in Article 46, internal violations of domestic law known to other contractor, that is the Greece country, since the PA was not signed by the president in 2018, as provided by constitutional law in Article 119, and ratification document for PRESPA agreement was not signed by the Macedonian president, but by an unauthorized person, that is the Speaker of the Parliament. The treaty can be easily terminated. As we noted, erga omnes norms contained in the PRESPA agreement for mandatory internal application of ID modifiers may not be implementable in practice, their actual in performance at all. The implementation of such modifiers in domestic, legal, and social order generally or finally depends on the people's will to accept them, that is, to tolerate or resist them. People would need to be reconciled with the new imposed, thus unwanted new identity, and that imposition of alienated, redefined new identity obviously does not seem durable unless general cultural level is extremely low. Currently, most Macedonians despise the new name. And so we shall end this part of chapter 6, and we will continue the remainder of chapter 6, which includes the conclusions and recommendations by eminent Professor Dr. Igor Janev, who is the author of the PRESPA Agreement as Cultural Genocide of the Macedonian National Identity, a person who's published many and written many books, and who is an expert in international law. You've been watching In Focus with Silvana Pavlovska. Today is the 20th of April, 2024. I shall see you shortly. Don't go away.